of the site. According to Florida Congressman Maxwell Frost, who was among the Democratic members of Congress to tour the facility, these legislators were not allowed to speak directly with any of the prisoners. They were not allowed to see the medical facilities on site. Even so, what they did see sounds difficult to forget.
People are being held in cages. These cages hold 32 people per cage. There are 3 toilets in each cage for the group of 32 people, and their drinking water comes from the toilet. There's a little spigot on top of the toilet, and that's where they drink their water.
Congressman Maxwell Frost of Florida joins us live here next.
We actually heard reports from many immigrants that are within the facility that said, well, yesterday out of nowhere, they let us take a shower. They hadn't let us take a shower all week. Yesterday out of nowhere, the food, got a little better than it's been before. And of course, all of this is in connection to the tour we were doing. That's why these visits from elected officials are so important.
Florida Democratic Congressman Maxwell Frost describing what he and other Democrats are saying was a sanitized tour that they got this weekend of the immigration prison that Trump and the state of Florida have built in the Everglades. Congressman Frost joins us now live. Sir, thank you very much for being with us tonight. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk big picture here for a second. Why is it important to you that you get in there, for you as an elected official to see for yourself the conditions in there and for you to describe them to the public?
Well, number one, it's important because I'm one of the only people that's able to go inside that facility, walk outside of it, and deliver the truth. Say exactly what I saw and exactly what's going on. When I went in and we were standing at that door, looking at the cages, looking at the hundreds of men in there, I saw myself in those cages. I saw people who were my age, people who looked exactly like me. And I thought when we were walking out of those doors of the internment camp, I thought, I'm one of the only people that looks like me and that's my age that's going to actually walk out of this place without being deported or without being a staff member that's not allowed to really talk about what's going on in there. That's why it's so important for members of Congress to conduct oversight on these facilities. And we were some of the first people to go in there with a notebook, with a pen. I had pictures. I have a full notebook full of questions that I was looking to get answered, pictures of my constituents, information about their stories. And I'm going to be back. We originally planned this as an unannounced tour. Somehow they found out about it, and they ended up inviting us on the same day and time we were going to show up anyway. But we got to be clear. I don't need Ron DeSantis's permission. I don't need anybody's permission to pull up to an immigration detention center and do my job, which is to go and conduct oversight and tell the public about what's going on.
In terms of this facility, you used the term internment camp, and I saw your colleague Debbie Wasserman Schultz use that same phrase. Obviously, that's very evocative language with history in this country that is difficult for a lot of people. Talk about why you think that term is appropriate. I've been struggling with that myself just as a broadcaster in terms of how to talk about these things. I mean, in technical terms, if you've got a facility that's holding people indefinitely and there's no legal process to get in there and there's no legal process to get out, that is traditionally called a concentration camp or an internment camp. And I wonder about your specificity in using that language.
Well, sure as hell I'm not going to use what they're calling it. What they're calling it is to make light of the situation. What they're calling it is to make it a giggle or something you can sell merch on. And so I encourage people, don't call it what they're calling it, and everyone's using different language, different names. I'm going with internment or even prison, detention center, because this isn't even a detention center, right? The thing people have to realize too is when an immigrant is being detained, they're being detained because they're going through the legal process of deportation. They have not been convicted of a crime. They're not serving a sentence for a crime. And so they should not be treated in this way. And to be honest, even if you're treated as even if you've been convicted of a crime in this country, you shouldn't be treated this way as well. The conditions were horrible, and it's nothing less than what I called it. And I like to be very clear about things because we have too much BS in this world and in this politics where people want to sanitize stuff. We can't sanitize what's going on in the Everglades because it's going on around the country.
Let me ask you about some breaking news that's just happened within the past hour. The Washington Post is reporting under this headline, ICE declares millions of undocumented immigrants ineligible for bond hearings. This is a new revisited, quote, revisited legal position on detention and release authorities from the Trump administration. They're saying that anybody who came into the United States illegally is no longer eligible for a bond hearing. And that might sound like a technical bit of legalese, but what they're saying is that that means millions of people who crossed the border into this country, came to this country illegally, can be arrested now and have no right to get out. It literally could mean millions of people to be incarcerated indefinitely for the duration of any of their immigration proceedings, which can take months or years. Lawyers are responding to this by saying that this could mean the incarceration of millions of immigrants who came here over the past few decades, not people who have just arrived recently. I know you may or may not have had a chance to absorb this since this news just broke, but I wanted to get your instant reaction to it.
No, I saw it, and it's a complete perversion of a law and long-standing legal standard as it relates to detention. You know, for about a century in this country, if you are an immigrant, you're someone that's undocumented, and you're going through a process, maybe you've been arrested or detained, you're able to bond out, you're able to go back out in the world, continue to work, continue to be with your family as you go through the legal process. And that's been the standard for a century. In 1996, Congress passed a law that would essentially introduce this concept of mandatory detention for certain people, saying, well, judges can't give some immigrants the ability to bond out if they're a flight risk, if they've committed a crime, they have to remain detained. Now, the Trump administration is saying, well, that 1996 law applies to everyone, and it doesn't. They're completely wrong. And actually, this has already been settled in court in Washington at a detention center in Tacoma. So this will be litigated, but this points to something bigger. They want more people behind bars. They want to incarcerate more people, and they want to ethnically cleanse this country of certain types of immigrants. Because here's the thing. They're not going for every person here that's undocumented. Because when I was in that internment camp in the Everglades, I didn't see any Europeans who overstayed their visa. I saw nothing but Latino men and Haitian men. And as we look at these operations going around the country, they are targeting specific types of people, and it's the type of people that look like me.
Congressman Maxwell Frost, thank you, sir. We will be right back. Stay with us. All right, that's going to do it for me tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Now it's time for the last word with the great Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Good evening, Rachel. You know, I was listening to Maxwell Frost there tonight and remembering the first time I heard his name, which was from David Hogg telling me that he found this guy who he's supporting in a race for Congress. He's really young. If he's elected, he'd be the youngest member of Congress. His name is Maxwell Frost. And so we had him on the program at David Hogg's suggestion, I don't know, a week or two after that. And I was really impressed and thought it would be really cool if he really, you know, runs a good race. That would be a victory enough. And here he is, listening to him tonight, Rachel, and we you presented to him a breaking news story, really. And that happens to us. And I know that you haven't had time to fully master yourself that particular story. And you hand it to the guest, and he knows all about it. And I have to say, I was just so impressed with that, and yet not surprised because it's Maxwell Frost. But what he's here to actually talk about was completely unimaginable before Donald Trump entered politics, and it was actually unimaginable during Donald Trump's first term. It was not anything close to this level of cruelty in the first term.
Yeah, and that is true about the visit to the Everglades immigration prison camp that I was talking to him about. It's also true about that breaking news that I was asking him about. I mean, again, we're just absorbing this. This is like a novel legal interpretation just revealed by the Trump administration. But what they are talking about here is incarcerating millions of people, not 100,000 people, right? Not 50,000, not 40,000 something people, which is what they've got now, not 100,000 people, which is the kind of numbers they talked about for the scaling up of of immigrant imprisonment that they passed and funded in their last bill. What they're talking about, what this interpretation means, is instant incarceration, rounding up and incarceration of millions of people who are living peaceably in this country right now without process, purely on the executive branch's say-so, like not letting people go to prison, not letting people go to court to adjudicate this sort of thing, and not getting their say before a judge. If we're talking about putting millions of people in prison who have not committed crimes, we instantly are a completely different country than we are today. And obviously this is going to be litigated, and we will see what this means, but this is a really big reveal in terms of what they are planning on. Yeah, Maxwell Frost got it instantly, understood the origins of something like this and the radicalism of what they're doing all at once. And it's no longer a curiosity that he's the youngest person elected to Congress. He's a very serious member of Congress, one worth taking seriously, and somebody who I felt real lucky to have on the air tonight.
Yeah, and Rachel, when we're talking about a roundup of millions or a roundup that aspires to millions, there's no question that we're now talking about American citizens, native-born American citizens being rounded up that way, because how many of us are walking the streets with proof of citizenship in our pockets? And if you don't have that and they take you, you're going to have to wait for your hearing to prove that you're a citizen, the hearing that you're not going to get under this idea. And of course, with the Supreme Court today saying, sure, Donald Trump can at least temporarily abolish the Department of Education before we get to hear the actual merits on the case against the dissent of the three democratically appointed members of the Supreme Court. With the Supreme Court going that wild and being willing to go that far for things Donald Trump is doing, which they clearly never ever would have allowed a Democratic president to do anything similar to that. With this Supreme Court, I don't know. I don't know if millions of people not getting any kind of hearing, including American citizens caught in such a dragnet, I don't know if that's okay with the majority of the Supreme Court. It feels like it might be.
Yeah, I was, as a Massachusetts native, Lawrence, I know you know Interstate 495 well, the dreaded Interstate 495 was such a drag. I was driving down Interstate 495 this weekend in Massachusetts, and on one of the highway overpasses, there was a protest. You see a lot of those on overpasses in New England now, and that what they had up on the protest, on the like chain link fence on the overpass was immigrants now, citizens next. And I drove right under it and thought, succinctly put, and absolutely true.
And as of now, there really is nothing preventing that. There is no surefire thing that we can right now say to anyone, don't worry, if you're a native-born citizen of this country, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. They can never do this to you. We can't say that with any assurance at all.
Not unless this Supreme Court decides that it's going to draw a line. That's right.
Right. It's the Supreme Court standing between that possibility. And I don't mean them doing it deliberately. I mean them doing it by mistake. Legally, they cannot do it, but they sure are good at making mistakes in this arena.
Yeah. Thanks, Lawrence.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you.